Before I do so, let me point out several things. Maybe. This idea of answering questions. From one viewpoint, parts of life are wired up to say how pretentious, except no one generally notices it except run-of-the-mill smart alecks out in life, which are the same sorts of people that say that they're too smart to fall for this or for that. And of course they've fallen for something else, because everyone is falling for something. But the idea of answering questions, all over the world right now, as you hear this, there's seminars going on, college classes, perhaps they're going on somewhere. Ministers, rabbis, people supposedly with some sort of new self-help method, in ballrooms somewhere, in churches and temples, or staying up somewhere saying, I will entertain questions. And someone says, what should I do? My husband drinks and runs around on me and watches football all the time. What should I do? And the person says, well, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And someone says, I seem to have a very poor self-image. I can't seem to get along with the opposite sex, and I'm afraid you out of the house. And the person goes, well, and they give an answer. Now, when I say from one viewpoint it's pretentious, I'm not trying to plant any sort of subtle message to anyone. But from one viewpoint, you people should be old enough, because I may stop everything tonight. This may be the end of it, so you should be old enough to realize through my several maps, such as dominant and submissive, the transfer of energy. My old question is to why prisoners of war can remember the general at West Point who told them it was better to live or to die like a coward, die like a hero, and live like a coward, and how come truisms are always more effective when they seem to have an external source. But how is it that you end up in life looking at another fucking human and saying, I'd like to ask you a question, if I may? All right, now ordinarily, now wait a minute. I'm certainly not here being sarcastic, as you know by now, but ordinarily, things are arranged within the general scheme of life so that you ask somebody a question on the basis that they are already tied in with some kind of credential somewhere. That you go to see a apparent expert or a knowledgeable person in their field. And if you get beyond the realm of carpenters and automobile mechanics, in many instances, life is arranged for the state, the government, to have some sort of regulatory commission or board that says this person is indeed qualified to practice psychiatry. At least in the United States, of course, those that apparently are working for the Lord get by with less overseeing than hairdressers. But you expect, and life is arranged, that a person apparently has some sort of credentials. Or this person has studied, they spent 12 years getting a degree in psychiatry or psychology. They have passed such and such boards, and no one ever questions it. It is a part of the scheme of life. It is a part of that great game. But from another viewpoint, if you're going to be grown up, it's not just some sort of sarcastic question. It truly is. And the proof is before you. It always has been. What am I asking this person that question for? Because they don't know. Of course, to even get into a three-dimensional world, the answer to that is, or the response is to why do people ask a minister or a rabbi or a psychiatrist, what's the answer to this? What should I do? It's not simply that that's ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that you know that they don't know the answer and you don't care. Of course, I'm saying that in a very casual fashion because that is not within the conscious knowledge of people. But I'm going to ask somebody, what should I do? They've got credentials. They're going to tell me. Chances are I'm not going to do it. Chances are they don't know. They don't have any experience in it. But so what? Doesn't matter anyway, so you ask them. They tell you. Or you pay to go to a seminar, or you pay to undergo analysis for a while. You ask them. They seem to be the dominant one. They're on the stage, or they're the doctor behind the desk. They take your money. And I say, that's a very interesting question. I'm going to level with you. I'm going to tell you the answer. I'm going to tell you what to do. If the truth be known in a three-dimensional world, at the very least, they don't care what's going to happen. They don't know. They perhaps didn't even understand the question the way in which you ask it. They don't have any interest in whether you're going to follow through or not, although they'll say, be sure and check back with me, come in next week, write to me, send me a card or a letter. They don't care. They don't know whether it'll work. They may even think, well, it's never worked before, but they don't know what else to tell you. They've got some sort of, not in the binary world, but it's, you know, of course, we're not talking about people having this knowledge. It's life has this knowledge. But it would be as though the minister or the rabbi or the psychiatrist realizes, I don't know what I'm talking about, but your problem's no real problem. I don't even know why you're here. I can tell you're not even that interested. You just wanted to come here. So I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you very seriously, but it's not serious, and you don't care. You probably won't do it. If you do it, it probably won't work. And if it doesn't work, you don't care, but chances are it might as well work, or chances are you might feel better just by having come here. Well, all of you should have sneaking suspicions of all of this. There's nothing wrong. Nobody's being fooled. Nobody's being misled. Everybody gets their money's worth. You can't be cheated in life. There's no such thing as a con game. Con games are a legitimate game. Everybody gets their money's worth. And so now back to me answering questions. If I apparently answer some question, which I can stand up here and do, and I have done with you people in private, that you came to me with what apparently was a specific problem, and I took it quite seriously, that you turned to me, and you asked me, would I make some comment on what seems to be a problem, or a question. Anything I can say, do you understand that I could also give an opposite answer? Now, I have upped the stakes a little from my intro to this. I'm not now talking about ordinary life, but in ordinary life, that's absolutely true. It just doesn't appear to be true. A psychiatrist trained, let us say, in the United States, licensed to practice psychiatry in any of our 50 states. Things are just wired up such that this is almost a safe bet for me just to make a blanket statement. That if you went in and told a psychiatrist, listen, I am having very deep-rooted feelings of hatred toward my mother. I've never let them out. We've always been close, but I feel like now I'm going to die. I see her 2 or 3 times a year. I feel like I'm going to die if I don't just walk up to her and say, listen, I've been mad. I've been hostile toward you for years, and I could almost strangle you. What should I do? I think it's a fairly safe bet that this is the way life is wired up now. You should know this. That anyone who would go through, anyone who seemed to be wired up to be attracted to the practice of psychiatry, who enrolled in school, who went through it all, who graduated, and then who took the test, and who was licensed by any state, that there's no psychiatrist around that would say, well, here's what I'd do. Next time you see your mother, I would say that, and then I'd immediately leap for her throat. Don't kill her now, because you could get caught. But at least throw her down and hurt her real bad. I mean, she'll get the message and you'll feel better. Now, I assume you see why I'm saying that it's just safe to assume, to say the very least, that there's no psychiatrist that will do that. But if we could stretch justice around for you to try and hear what I was pointing at, any answer could be reversed, and it's just as well. Now, it's up one notch, but it's also true with me doing this. It's a matter, I've got a handful of questions here from based on last week of my great cosmic guideline I gave you of either you do or you don't. And as I could have predicted, some of you almost felt as though I had crammed a damp towel down your throat, or that I had misled you in some way, or that I had misled you up until last week, and then spilled the beans. But if you had a real understanding, which I'm going to try and do a little bit more tonight, of either you do or you don't, then you'd understand why any answer is always conditional, and why any answer could also be its opposite, and there's no real difference, because it's a matter of the person listening to it, assuming the person answering it had some knowledge beyond the binary world of how things work. Then it's a matter of the listener, the questioner who presented the inquiry. They're wired up, they either do or they don't. So then what you respond, I can take, if we split into binary possibilities, so for me to read a question and say, all right, the answer to that is yes, and then I expound on it a little bit. Or a lot. I could also say no, and expound on it an equal amount, with an equal amount of vigor. It's then a matter of the person, anybody listening, they're wired up, they either do or they don't. I'm going to read some of the questions. And also, I didn't bring them, but some of the letters that I received from you people out of town who write me periodically. I'm going to throw in a few of those as I go along, just from my memory for the last couple of months. And also you people who write me oftentimes, they're hearing these tapes and meeting in other cities. Let me point out, as you should note, sometimes I write you back and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I respond to what you ask or that you noted on these tapes in succeeding weeks. But also let me note, sometimes the letters I get that include rhetorical questions, notes, observations, sometimes I respond and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I simply don't. But sometimes I really don't, because the letter was so good, the questions were so good, that I really don't respond. It's not that I just don't respond. I mean, I really don't respond. So keep that in mind. That sometimes I just don't respond, but sometimes I really don't respond. When they're real good, that does not that would interfere for me to make an immediate response. Okay, let's see what we got. What is the feeling of personal loss and personal connection that occurs when there is a tragedy out in life that involves famous people, as in the shuttle explosion this week? Does everyone get the question? It's a very reasonable, good question. There is a kind of passing, that is, it changes, but a kind of genetic royalty within a group of people. And they can experience, on a genetic level, a loss when the king dies. You have all read, and you've had your own partner probably make all kinds of rude and smart aleck comments about royalty and kings and leaders, and it's everybody's right and hobby to make fun of the president and prime ministers. Stick your tongue out at pomposity. But which that's part of life, that's part of the scheme. Somebody's got to do it. But also, this very thing, and what we're talking about, people that see this tape later, was one of the shuttle flights blew up this week and killed 6 or 7 astronauts just a few minutes off the launch pad. And the whole country here almost came to a stop. And it's not something to simply laugh at. It happens when presidents get assassinated, and it's got nothing really to do with upper levels, upper circuits of someone saying, well, the president that got shot last week was a Republican. Now I'm a Democrat. I didn't like his policies anyway. Good riddance. Not that there's not a little bit of that possible in life's body. But in general, as all of you should know, a president gets shot. And people have no particular interest in politics. It's like a mood sweeps over the country, the community. In this case, it's a country. There are people that can make fun of royalty. You know, they do obscene plays about royalty in the Netherlands. Then the Queen Mother gets sick or dies, and it's like a majority of the country goes into mourning. People, you can't even get close. One of the richest women in the world, one of the richest families, all you ever do, she rides by. Maybe once a year if you're there, you see a little wave, and she disappears in this huge castle. But genetically, there is a reality to this that you can experience, you can feel it. Now, ordinarily, people would turn around, and I'm sure this has already happened, or it will happen, that the psychologist and their ilk, life will bring about that kind of binary, that kindergarten explanation, which is valid if that's as far as you need to go with it. That, all right, you're not interested in the space program, or you weren't interested in our president or politics, but when a tragedy happens, a mood actually hits the country, and so it's the environment affects some people that have no interest in politics. That the president died, and it's just everybody else, or a great number of people seem to feel sad, so it affects you. Yeah, it makes sense, right? That is not it. It is not environmental, since there is no environment. It is genetic. Is that strange enough? But some of you can hear this one now. I don't have to prove it anymore. Well, I never had to prove it. But you just happen to be sitting there in a bar, and suddenly it flashes on the explosion of the space shuttle, or suddenly it comes on and says, our president has been assassinated. And let's say in either case, you've got no interest in the space program, you've got no interest in politics, and you're sitting there at a bar by yourself, you and the bartender, and he's in the back somewhere, and something happened. It is not environment. People are connected. There is no out there. There is no beginning and end to the sky. There is no beginning and end to the weather. There is no beginning and end to genetics. There is a sensation that we're separate. It's part of the necessary sensation that I've tried to hint and cajole some of you into seeing, that is tied right into the blossoming of the yellow circuit. And the closer, or the further back you can go down the nervous system of man, that is right now to get into areas of the world that are not as yellow circuit centered. The yellow circuit is not as, if not dominant, necessary. In the less civilized places on this planet still going on, you have a sense more of what used to be called community. You've got more of a sense. Of course, they now have, as long as they're verbal, they've got to have stories for it. And their stories, even right now, are as old as Western world stories about gods and mythology. But what they're attempting to do is, through the yellow circuit, is to put words on the genetic bond between a community, which is between all people, that they believe that their ancestors are not dead, that they're now living in trees, or that they are inhabiting animals. It's just all the various forms that all of you have read and heard about of the belief in spirits, mystical ties between families, and whole strains of families that run throughout tribes, and how they split up. And someone will say, I can tell some of my cousins and uncles split off from our tribe 50 years ago, and they live 100 miles through the forest out west, and I haven't seen them. We haven't heard from them in 50 years, and yet last night 2 or 3 of us woke up and we knew something terrible had happened. And sure enough, they find out that a fire swept through the forest and killed half of their distant relatives, or all of them. And of course, they attribute the guides talk to us, and etc. Now, that's mystical enough. That's strange enough. Nowadays, most people are used to it. Those kind of stories, whether you actively adopt them or not. But in a real sense, it's even stranger. As people try to ask me at times, is there anything to premonition? Yeah, but not like you know. It's not that the gods are speaking to you, and it's not that spirits brought me a message. It's simply there is no out there. Part of life's body gets hurt, and a large part of it can feel it. Just because you can't feel it all the time doesn't mean it's not going on. Just because you can't feel it and correctly interpret it doesn't mean it's not going on. But whenever life's body is harmed, whenever the community of man is harmed, it does more than the people who seem to be physically hurt or destroyed. It's more than that. The rest of the body feels it. But it has never, until now, been interpreted in this way. It was interpreted in the way in which it had to be, in the way in which it was profitable at the time. But it is as though some of these maps I've drawn out, some of you flip back and forth from trying to take them literally to at times letting your partner tell you it's just almost hogwash and I'm trying to point to something else. But life itself, man, in the body of life is acting, in a sense, as a real circulatory system. And there is no separation between man. There's no separation between individuals, between countries. There is no separation between man and this planet. Man is carrying a particular kind of blood, a particular kind of energy for life itself. And somebody gets hurt. A large number of people get hurt, or an individual gets hurt that you've never seen, you've got no personal connection to, and you can feel it. You and many other people can feel it. The person did also ask a little bit more. Why is it the memory of, well, this includes famous people, is what the person was pointing out or asking about. That is, hearing that the president's been assassinated, or these astronauts blown up 70 seconds off the launch pad, that there seems to be a difference between that and you picking up the paper and reading that a family of 5 got burned to death in Indiana. It may give their names and you don't even read it. It's just a small thing, so you know it's nobody famous. You glance at the name, it says Patterson or somebody, and that's not your name. You don't know anybody there. And so we can say that you don't particularly feel anything. So part of the question was, why does it seem that famous people, all right, try this, that life itself has a certain kind of memory, be it short-term or long-term, of its more illustrious attempts. Regardless of whether you apparently be political or apolitical, in a sense, anyone who gets to be president of the United States or governor of a state or a mayor, in a sense it is quite real and necessary in life, is more illustrious than you are. Listen, you're just an everyday bricklayer or computer operator. The astronauts, that is what makes people famous, is life is doing something to some degree that at least is ephemerally illustrious, something new. Probably somewhere yesterday, or day before yesterday, 7 people probably died in a bus accident in India, Peru, Russia. 7 nobodies that may be in the paper somewhere. And if you read that, if 7 people died in a bus wreck in Colorado the same day that the shuttle exploded, and you looked at that, it would not be the same sensation. 7 unknown people. Because it is not you at work. It is not simply you as an individual, as you as some isolated organism looking at the paper and making some analyzation that, wait a minute, 7 astronauts got killed. Here's the front page, the headlines, and it seems to produce a feeling. Then you turn over a few more minutes and you find on the back page 7 people killed as a bus plunges off an iced road in Colorado. And there's no feeling. You pass up more opportunities, which that's what you're supposed to do unless you're got trapped in this thing. That, all right, there's got to be some explanation, but it's, I guess it has to do that, well, I had some interest in the space program. I've read about it. The yellow circuit, remember, as you know, can always come up with some explanation. But there is no explanation at the yellow circuit level, because it is, in a sense, in a quite real sense, it is the genes of life's own body passing information. And the death of the astronauts was different than the death of 7 unknown people in Colorado. The 7 people were on their way to a football game, on their way to a gambling sojourn down to Nevada, on their way to do nothing, or to do that which people do every day. But one part of life's body was doing something extraordinary, still extraordinary, in these space shuttles. The president being assassinated, how many people in this country get killed a day? I don't know, 100, 200 shot? But it's not the same thing. And it's got nothing to do with politics, got nothing to do with science, got nothing to do with the space program, it's got nothing to do with your personal interest. It's just another piece of life speaking that people have never analyzed in this way. They've never had occasion to. It is the genes vibrating in the whole body of man, or in this case, in a localized, what we call the United States. It's like one area of the body has been bruised, been traumatized, and it's, to at least jump into a figurative mode, I guess it's almost impossible to bruise one cell. I guess you could take a pin and stick it in one cell and say, all right, I traumatized that cell, but the ones around it feel it. Your whole finger, if you just do that, then it feels like your whole finger's hurt. If you stick a pin down your finger good, I would go so far as to point out that the affair would not be totally unknown to your forearm. It especially would not be unknown to this and this, because it would be the one that says, ooh, goddamn, I stuck myself with a pin. How can I get out of my head? This is based, more or less, remember I've used that phrase in the past, pointing out that at one time I asked you the rhetorical question, could you see that in our day and time, your contemporaries and most of you, that in a sense, people live more in their head than they do in their house, or that they do in their neighborhood, or that they do in their car. How can I get out of my head, parentheses, hell isn't a great place to be. All right, everybody is wired up to be lodged somewhere. Now, me saying that people live in their head, let me refer you back to an expansion right quick of what I've drawn several times of late of the circuits themselves, and then me asking you to consider the fact or the possibility, or for you to feel it yourself, that it's almost as though the circuits are one thing going on, and then consciousness is almost something else, that you can be conscious of the circuits. All right, for someone to say, how can I quit living in my head, parentheses, hell isn't a nice place to be. That is, they're registering a complaint, I believe we're safe in assuming. All right, notice this. If you start off assuming, taking the words of living in one's head, that, all right, that's the yellow circuit's domain by and large. We're going to locate it physically. But note, anyone who asks it this way is not living in their head yellow circuit speaking. That's not where their head is. Their head is down in here. Now, it can be the feeling that my head is nuts, my head does not cooperate, my head is not a pleasant place to be. But we are now not discussing, in any sense, an isolated yellow circuit phenomenon. The most blatant prescription that all of you are sadly familiar with already is to change the focus of where you seem to be living. As you can be living in your head all the way from here down to here. If that is where consciousness seems to be focused. And to try and change your focus, of course, here we go, as all of you know, and some of you, apparently to your chagrin, if not your physical pain, is for those that are apparently living in the head yellow circuit-wise. Is to just take up serious weightlifting, just as one for instance. Just go to that place that you would have never gone to in your life, assuming you are the 98-pound archetypical weakling with big old thick glasses and 20 pencils in your pocket. Is to go down to a gym. Find a gym called Doc's. Find a gym. Don't go to one of these fitness places. Find a place. It should be upstairs. It should have a wooden floor, and there should only be 2 rules posted when you find Doc. Plus, Doc should be tattooed on his forearms. There should be 2 rules. Pay on time and don't spit in the floor. Right? The person who is living in their head, yellow circuit-wise, they should go there, and I'm talking about, this is just one possibility that several of you have been confronted with, is go take up serious damn weightlifting. Not for any reason. That is not to become big and strong and popular. If that happens as a side effect, that's your problem. But to go there in the kind of environment that you would have never sought out, that in fact is frightening to your head, is to go there and to take it up in a serious manner, like 2 hours an afternoon, 6 days a week. An ordinary person, I can't tell you in any objective way what benefit that would be. If I could make some ordinary person do it, they would say, that's the best thing I have ever done. But that's simply a matter that they're wired up, and some either do or they don't. Now, if you're attempting to do this, it creates something else. Not expanded lats and trats and biceps and triceps. It expands something else. It expands the field of focus where you seem to live. And conversely, those that show up here and are living in their head, and their head seems to be the red circuit, just good old run-of-the-mill bricklayers, bums, carpenters, beer drinkers, ne'er-do-wells, is go by God and roll back in school at night and major in mathematics or physics. Blue circuit people that seem to live there, they should just do anything in the world that conflicts with torment, suffering, and the dreaded ennui. Can men and women develop friendship that bypasses sex? I know this will get a laugh, but I've got to point this out. Yes, but under ordinary conditions, which we're not, but under ordinary conditions, why should you? It's my sworn duty and obligation that I had to put that on the record. Now back, since this kind of activity cannot tolerate just unbridled, constant sexual flirting and swapping partners and all of that, I'll take the question another way, to another level. It is quite possible, you sitting here in the group have been exposed to it, that there are men and women in this group who are friends in the way that 2 generations ago at least, you did not, as a rule, find men and women friends in that way. All of life, as you know, has been changing somewhat in the sexual realm. I don't mean just the sexual so-called revolution, but the way in which women's position in the scheme of things have changed just mechanically. You can be friends, but you have got to see, this is why I pointed out concerning that little rule of ours here that there cannot just be unbridled sexual activity in the group. The group can't stand it. People can't stand it. You can be friends, but you might as well face the fact that you're not going to find any sort of relationship between men and women that is sans any sexual content. It just is. But I can take it a little bit further and say that any activity whatsoever has got a piece of sex in it. There is a piece of sex in it of the old boys' nights out, of men going to war, of men hanging around bars, and I'm not talking about some homosexual activity, but of guys going out and hanging around together. There is a piece of sex in that. There is a piece of sex in all sports, football games, soccer. There is, perhaps I should just ask you, would you like to find anything that you are just absolutely convinced in your more enlightened moments that you can see anything involving two people that you're convinced that this is going on and sex is not involved whatsoever? And I'm not speaking in some pseudo-psychological sense. But back to the question. There is a touch of sex in any kind of friendship between men and women. But you cannot take that as being an excuse for any behavior. Not here. You can't say, well, in that case, I'm going to avoid any sort of friendships. Or you can't use an excuse about, well, if that's the case, then I can increase my flirting tolerance. It just is. I've even had questions that periodically come up of someone asking me here, or noting to me that they feel as though they have a slight problem that they're sexually attracted to somebody in this group that's already with another partner. And that, you know, what a horrible thing this is to bear, and that I don't know whether I can take it. It's surprising how people can be forced to behave in a civilized way, just ordinary people. But then if they feel that if in any way I am extraordinary, or I should be extraordinary, then there's got to be some sort of surcease for my routine suffering or discomfort. Why? I mean, for someone to become involved with this and to feel as though, well, I am now sexually attracted to somebody in this group and you've made this rule that we can't, you know, get into sexual intrigues here, and I can't start trying to take somebody's woman or man away from them. You know, woe is me. What'll I do? A couple of times I pointed this out to the people that asked me that, and once or twice I believe they heard a piece of it. If you were sexually attracted to some woman and she was with a man, I'll direct this toward men because men are the ones that always ask this. I've yet to have a woman say, I am about to die. I've got to have this guy so bad. I mean, I hate to tell you guys this, but I have never had a woman say that. But assuming this back to a man asking such a thing, a couple of times I have asked the people involved, all right, how would it be if we were just in ordinary life and she was with a guy that was 6'8", weighed about 400 pounds, and picked his teeth with a bowie knife? And about the first time that you had ever spent more than 5 minutes around her and him, he came over to you and said, I don't like what I'm smelling. If I ever see you even look at my woman again, I'll break both your knees and I'll probably kill you. But you can count on 2 broken knees. Is it not surprising in the ordinary world how many men would suddenly decide, well, hell, she doesn't look that great anyway. Also in life's body, all of you should know, throughout history there's been a constant cry in the world of Caesar, in the horizontal world, of them saying, hey, let's institute new rules, even making more and more types of sexual behavior forbidden. And then somebody will say, nay, nay, the government, the horizontal world, has no business getting into some of this because you cannot legislate morality. And every now and then, that seems to be the binary part, and it just seems to stop and then fade away, and it comes back and it pops up somewhere else. But every now and then, life will bring in almost, it's not an E person, but it's like a D person about to slide into E. If you didn't watch it, that another voice will come up and say, yeah, but you can make people behave better. Through the fear of a 6'8", 400-pound guy, or through the fear that the state's going to catch you doing it, and it's 5 years in prison. Well, I used to think I wanted to do that, but, you know, if the state says that that's perverted, hell, I won't do it. You know, boy, am I a nice person. All right, let's try a hard one. I had several. I don't mean hard for me. This is referring back to what I mentioned last week about either you do or you don't. And I just grabbed a couple here, but I had a handful of you people made some note, and one person said, it seems that the either you do or you don't is really such a notion that we can't do anything with it. It doesn't seem to create any new energy in me. Another person says what you said last week about either you do or you don't had a certain comfort in it. And yet, being a life-level description, something was lacking too. It seems that when you go above line level, things could not be so cut and dried. Yes and yes. All right, back to what I pointed out last week. If we took it just literally, if you just took it literally, if I said, this is it, this is the closest to the secret, or this is the secret, I told you I would never tell you, or I couldn't tell you, is this is it. In all instances, you either do or you don't. That's the beginning and that's the end of it. If we left it at that, what would you have? You would have nothing. You would have two-dimensional recollections of all sorts of instances where life was attempting to be illustrious. You would have such things as, to give you a historical notation, in the late 50s when the so-called beat movement was somewhat popular in the United States, at least in the literary world, and then seeping into the artistic world, and they began to come up with translations of Zen writings. And it got to be, it began to permeate slightly the overall consciousness of this part of the world. And a large part of its fascination was the way in which it's not just based on language, but it's not separate from this reality of the translations over a period of 1,000 years, a very different genetic culture into these so-called Zen writings, and it comes out as, hey, whatever is, is. And back then people had goatees and berets, and they'd go, crazy, man. That was hip circa 1957 to 60. Yeah, daddy-o. But it began to permeate this part of the world. It is not far removed from this psychological fad that was also around for a while, and I believe was a fairly good selling book about I'm okay, you're okay. Being, as I recall, it was written by a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and having a notion of what was going on in life, I didn't have to read the book. It apparently stretched that into you're okay, but it's also okay to feel as though you're not okay and want to change. What I have described as either you do or you don't, if it is left at the binary level, which is the verbal level, you have absolutely nothing, because it sounds as though that things are as they are and they cannot be otherwise, which is true. But that's true on the binary level. That's true on the level that no individual can change. That is true on the level that life cannot change drastically. If it attempted to change it drastically, it would not be true. That the atom cannot be split overnight, manned flight could not be conceived, and the technical wherewithal produced for it to happen over the weekend. Electricity in the form of producing light could not be fulfilled from its initial conception to the actual production of light bulbs in a month's time. Life cannot drastically change itself. But consider the fascination of all binary-based tales, theories, excuses, religions, philosophies, that everything is as it must be. That will drag a crowd in. If you have a modicum of stage persona, if you can get some good lighting, have your hair done, and you feel like you should be in show business, anytime, any place on this planet, given the right conditions, and not much more than I just described, get your nose fixed, take a few speaking lessons, have some dramatic music, have a good intro, have somebody that's a very good announcer to introduce you, give your background, tell how much you suffered, how you finally saw the light, and then come out and your main message is, listen, things do not always seem to please us individually, but things are as they must be. Given a few other conditions, anyone who presents that will not go hungry. They will not be without some small following. And that is not limited to mystical groups and cults. It's religions. What is missing is the understanding of it. And the lack of understanding of it would also cause someone to say that listening to this literally, it does not seem to produce any energy. If it was taken on a binary level, if it was taken literally, I could go even further and say it would almost take away some energy. That if you thought you understood anything, and then if I said, wait, all right, I'm going to tell you the secret, and this is it, and I'm leaving. This is it, this is the final night. And the secret is either you do or you don't. And that's it. Everything else was just a prelude. All right, if you jumped from having, if this was possible, that your condition was no longer as hardwired as it was when you first got involved with this, and then you took this as being the secret. I said, this is it, I'm telling you, and I'm leaving. You would feel as though, hey, somebody's cut me off at the ankles. But it's not because of what I said, it's not because of the words, it would be because of a lack of understanding. Either you are or you aren't, either you do or you don't. Remember, includes everything. It includes those who apparently do in any situation and who said they wish they didn't. Those who say they do and say they can't help themselves. Those who say they do and that they're glad they do. Those who say they do and they're glad that most other people don't. Those who say they do and they wish that everybody did. Those who say they don't and say, I wish I could. Those who say, I don't and I'm glad I don't. Those who feel as though I can't and I wish that everybody else felt that way. It includes it all. What it does not include is anyone who is conscious beyond the binary level. Because then you see what I put into words. What you see is the binary basis of all so-called conflict, which is not conflict. It is the transmission of blood, of energy. It is the movement within life's body. Because either you do or you don't, and that includes everybody. Those who do and wish they didn't. Those who do and wish that they could do more. And every possibility that could be verbalized. It is there that the binary world seems to produce only C and D. That there are some people who are religious. They say they're religious, they claim to be religious, and they will punch you out if you say they're not. And those people say that everyone else should be religious and that many people are not religious. And apparently then there's a conflict. Or they say everyone should be of religion X. And some of you people claim to be a religion Y, and as far as I'm concerned, that's no religion. And the people that's in religion Y says the same to you. Apparently there is a conflict. Apparently there's something going on besides this group of religious X people and religious Y people. Then there's apparently this kind of cloud between the two. This thing called conflict, disagreement, hostility. And it's not. It's an illusionary enemy. Because the simple answer is, either you do or you don't. That is the binary world. Except human consciousness believes that it sees something else, that it sees conflict. It does not see conflict. It is not seeing the reality of either you do or you don't. How is it that guys can get so excited over bigger and better ways to kill people? Seems that they can also get very excited over sexual material or the latest model of automobile. I can seem to understand the sex, but not the car, or especially the joy of killing other people. I assume that most of you would guess that a woman, I'll give you a hint. Well, it's not funny, but a woman did write that. Either you do or you don't. It is still part of man. That is, this time, man, the gender. It is still part of ordinary man's responsibility to thin out his own herd. It is genetic. I would hope that some of the laughter, when I said a woman wrote this, I heard many women laughing. That some of you women do understand that there is a basic reality in this question, that you are not wired up to feel that particular way, and it does seem alien. But I assure you it's not alien to men. The reality is still there. But it is not a flaw in humanity. It is a flaw in someone attempting to do this, of course. I'll point that out again for the benefit of you friends and neighbors who have just joined us. But the reality of man, the gender, responsibility to thin out the populace, it's by no means gone. And it is not a foible caused by man's religious upbringing, by his political upbringing, by his nationalistic chauvinism. It is not through anything that would ordinarily be referred to as environmental causes. Men want to kill men because of their blood. Men are driven to kill other men because they're alive. Men are driven to want a new Corvette because they're really alive. Or to cover all of it, men are driven to want new Corvettes and to kidnap the playgirl of the month, the bunny of the month, because of real decent reasons. Reasonable reasons. Once you referred back to the term essence and said it was in the future, and you were mentioning this in connection with some of the Sufi schools and American Gurdjieff schools. But now what significance is in that term? And they mention how they expanded things into the biochemical world and et cetera. Let me respond to it on a simple basis. You know, sometimes back when some of you people first came here, and because of some of the books I wrote publicly, I was using some of these Sufi ideas and things that Gurdjieff had used as like the original fishing expedition, and many of you people came here already immersed in those kind of terms and ideas that you had picked up from reading or talking to some of these American groups. But let me go to the heart of it. All of that is based on binary maps. And the idea that came from some of the earlier past kinds of efforts related to this, we're using terms such as essence. But it is not very far removed from what many of you grew up with in religion, that there is something in man that is yet to be fully realized. Now I can turn all this into a biochemical description, as I have already done. I can point out to you that there are parts of the nervous system right now, there are parts of everyone's brain that is not being used. But the old binary maps, the static maps that referred to there being two parts of man, was always on the basis that something was amiss, that there was some part of man that had been covered up through his untoward behavior. There was some part of man that had rusted due to disuse. There was some part of man that was yet to be fully activated because of his stupidity. But once it gets out into the general verbal population, it is then on an absolutely binary level that there is something to be done to everybody that is currently lacking, and that's not true. Because when we speak of everyone, you either are or you aren't. I'm not really responding specifically in any detail the way in which the person asked the question. But what I wanted to try and slap you with again, that you can't overdo it for a long time, is to realize the absolute, worldwide, inescapable lure, call, capture of binary maps. They just fit everything. They answer all questions because they're based upon the binary reality of you either do or you don't. That is, you either are an enlightened person, a New Age person, or you're just an ordinary idiot. Now, which are you? And then those who think they're interested in this, they think, well, right now, there's no doubt about it. I'm a damn idiot because I can't understand all of this. I can't do what this mystical system purportedly taught. I can't even do what my forefathers' religion taught. So I have missed the mark, I've missed the boat. I'm on the wrong track, I'm stupid, I'm weak. I'm a person of no essence. If that's what you are, then that's your essence. Because you only got two choices. You either do or you don't. Well, I don't. All right, well, that's what you do, is you don't. Back again. There is a apparent passion that works itself in to life's body through man in a binary fashion. I would even point out to you, especially some of you newer people listening to this on tape, or even people here, there is a kind of ordinary emotional impact that is lacking in what I have done. Some of you people are having trouble in other cities. I gave you the responsibility, if I'm going to keep this up, that you've got to find larger numbers of people to show up and to meet in these other cities for me to start coming back there, or for me to even continue singing these tapes. There is a kind of weakness in you people showing tapes of me. There's a kind of weakness in me showing up in person, because at the ordinary level there is an emotional impact that is lacking. Now, justice has prevailed, because those that in the beginning needed that, severely so, that they were wired up that they either did or they didn't, and part of what they did was need that kind of emotional impact. They might have lasted 30 minutes, they might have lasted one time listening to me talk. I am very aware of it. But now let me point out something to you, not as excusez-moi, because I have done it as much as anything can be done on purpose. The kind of passion that you would see from an ordinary guru, from an ordinary minister, from an ordinary rabbi. Let me point out something to you, not as excusez-moi, because I have done it as much as anything can be done on purpose. The kind of passion that you would see from an ordinary guru, from an ordinary minister, from an ordinary rabbi with a good cause, with a good message to make, a purpose in speaking. There is a kind of passion all the way from that to a rock band showing up, to a Vegas act. A man or woman can have a fairly well-trained or naturally pleasing voice, and if they come out and have no stage presence, seem to have no interest in what they're doing, and they just stand there and sing, you're not going to stay there. You'll never go see them again. Whereas on the contrary, with a certain kind of passion, and I don't mean anything right now very mystical, just what ordinary people already know, a kind of stage presence, a kind of enthusiasm, a soul to it, that you can have an act, let's say, stick in showbiz, a musical act, that if you attempted to disassemble what they were doing, the singer, the band itself, you could say, hey, I know some teenagers down the street that are actually that good technically. Yeah, but, you know, when they get to cooking, you know, there's something about it. I jump back from Vegas to what seems to be a more important world. The world of mysticism and religion and the spiritual, would-be spiritual life of man. When it gets down to a binary level, the way it comes out in life, there is a kind of passion that when the time is right, when it's doing what is necessary, the right time, the right place, that which is binary under the right conditions has its own passion, because it has its own built-in opposite. That is why you're able to turn on TV and you can feel what's going on. You don't have to be a Southern Baptist. Turn on one of these preachers, pacing a stage, waving a Bible, screaming about communists and homosexuals and women's livers and Russians. Evil, just rampant. And you look out there, and the camera pans around. They're in the damn Cow Palace or Madison Square Garden, and there's 40 or 50,000 people. Apparently intelligent enough to get in a car or a subway. They got there, they got on clothes, and here's this guy pacing. He's waving this Bible, and he's talking about communists, and he's falling on his knees, and he's saying this world does not have much longer to live. And people are crying. People are standing up and shouting. Now let's say that you were raised, as you should have been, like a good Buddhist or a Muslim or a Jew, anything but a Southern Baptist, let's say. That was a joke for you Southern Baptists. That you and your partner can look at that and go, my, tut, tut. And your partner can say, well, we've got no interest in that. What I want you to see the interest in is that anything that is binary in the right time and place has its own passion, because it has its own enemy. Every C has its own D. Every God has its own anti-God. Every scientific truth has its anti-truth, its falsity. When you get as far as I have taken you people, when it's gone as far as I've listened to live, see, I've cut it off. I hadn't listened to much in several years. But as far as I've taken some of you, as far as just the general effect that's been on all of you and some of you people in other cities, it's way beyond, as you feel, a point that there is some kind of clear-cut struggle going on here. It's us against the world. That you people have found me, the great leader, our possible salvation, and I'll take us through the land of the Philistines. We will overcome stupidity, ignorance, wrong thinking. That is, everybody that can't hear what I'm talking about. That by God we'll knock them down, as Elmer Gantry said, and we'll stomp them. We'll kick evil people in the ass, and we'll get rid of booze and dope, and sexual perversions and greed. When you get beyond the binary world and its immediate enemies, you have lost immediately. If you don't do anything else, you have lost a very certain emotional impact. Some of the people in other cities now trying to round up new attendees. It's nothing new. None of them are really surprised because they've seen it happen already. But now they're off on their own. I just gave them almost carte blanche. It's up to you. They run ads. I don't oversee it. Promoting videotapes, readings based upon my teachings, my ideas. I just left it anything they want to put. 20 people show up. Before the evening's over, half leave. Half of those return again. And you people are concerned. Of course, you people here, I've given you tasks before to do public programs. And part of you starts out being astounded, those of you who have really gotten something from this, that how in the world, how can we drag in X number of people here and they hear part of this, or especially you show up in person and you give them a fair-sized evening, you talk about this and that, you don't really insult anybody directly, and I don't drop my pants and moon the crowd, and yet it's over. And most of them just kind of wander off like, how can that be? The real question is, how can it be otherwise? It's just being around this, most of you, not counting you people just getting this from afar and just becoming exposed to this, that once you begin to understand things and they become part of you, you forget how far removed it is from ordinary consciousness. You just do. But a very real part of it is a very mechanical, a very specific lack of an emotional impact, because there apparently are no enemies to this. So maybe some of you newer people keep waiting for me to finally crack and say, okay, I'm a New Age Turkish Sufi, and I'm here to tell you that it's the Armenians that are secretly trying to take over the world, and they're going to join up, if we don't watch it, with the Albanians, and then it's... But beyond what would seem to be specifics, as I was mentioning, is all of you need to see that religion, mysticism, the arts of all kinds, in the binary world, there is a passion involved with anything that seems to have some importance, that arises up. A brand new book. You know, one of these things, what was that, Jonathan Seagull, some years back. That apparently was more than just a book, it was some kind of allegorical statement to a whole generation. Sold millions, I think, just in several months. But almost as soon as it was selling, it was making the front pages of important papers and periodicals, you know this. By the time they could run off $1 million off the press, in just 4 or 5 weeks, just sold as fast as any book in history. Just almost immediately, very important people spoke up and said, my, what the world's coming to, that this kind of pseudo-intellectual pulp, this kind of egregious emotional oatmeal can pass for being some kind of allegorical story. That's what critics are for. I guess some people in the arts would be delighted to hear me line up critics or compare them with Satan and evil spirits, because it is the same thing, according to how you look at it. But what you should get some grasp of is that all binary concepts, based upon their degree of importance at any given time in the body of life, carry with it a very specific kind of mechanical, emotional impact. But when you start getting beyond binaryville, it's why this seems, some of you have forgotten it, but it seems to lack a kind of passion to it. And it's true. Now, oftentimes, what little there seems to be at times, I have to put into it. And part of what would have to be if this were to get any bigger publicly, if I were convinced that it should be, was in a sense it would have to be produced, because it is not natural to anything outside the city limits of Binaryville, because it does not carry its own antimatter with it. It does not carry its own Satans, demons. It does not carry its own D-force with it. So to a certain degree it appears to be rather impassionate, rather cut and dried, except for those that do have their own experience, but then it's not a mechanical passion to it. And the more you understand, the more you also understand that it's not the kind of passion that you can simply go out and produce. That if I turn the podium over to you and we start off some kind of public program, if you just gave on the basis of what you understand and what you've experienced, you would not be much more exciting than I am at times. But it'd be on the basis of, hey, there's got to be some of you who's going to hear what I'm going to tell you, and it's so astounding you're going to die. I mean, you're just going to roll over, you're going to feel like that you're about to die, you're going to be so delighted to hear it. And you tell them. And they wait for something. But what they're waiting on is that certain kind of mechanical passion to it. That we are right. What I'm telling you is right and everything else is wrong. Thank God you got here. Don't let this opportunity slip away. Stick with me. Well, you can laugh if you want to, because either you do or you don't. If you don't want to laugh, don't laugh. But you can laugh if you want to. That's not going to change it. Someone asked again about effects of physical trauma. You know, what can be done? There's people that, the group of people we have involved with this now, as you all know, people get hurt on their job, people get hurt playing football, lifting things. And someone asked if I would say anything else about trauma on the nervous system, the body itself, and what can be done to restore health besides drugs and exercise. Well, there's really only three things. And that's time, and extraneous biochemicals, drugs, and magic. Of course, from one viewpoint, time is the final magic. Because from one particular view, time will, as your grandmother used to tell you, cure everything. Grandmothers just did not know in what way they were correct. There is no absolute simple way for me to teach any of you people. I'll say this again. I hate to give people the blues. Some of you have been around long enough, you have seen me direct certain activities at very particular times that were acute with certain people in the group that seem to have had a certain beneficial effect. But there is no simple way that I can tell you for every little ache and pain you get. And I don't mean to discount the aches and pains you have by saying little. What is ordinarily referred to as magic, which is simply being able to affect the biochemical system of yourself, that which seems to be magic, all kinds of healing, is certainly possible. But it has a price, and it is not a simple thing to teach, nor is it simply a direct thing that I can do for you. As I have pointed out, if I fell tonight and broke my leg, I can guarantee you, I feel that I can absolutely guarantee this. Yeah, I'm sure I can. If I fell and broke my leg, I'll guarantee you I will go to a doctor and have him set it instead of me doing it myself. I will go pay the man the money. I'll consider it probably money well spent. Let him do it. Let him, in fact, x-ray it and say, yeah, we got it set just right. Stay off of it, which he didn't have to tell me that, but I'll pay him his money. It is quite truly, it's a matter of economics. I know you people, you think it's not. You think if there is information, if there are tricks you could do, tell me and I'll do it to myself, or help me do it. But it is a matter of economics. That's a part of what you don't know because it costs something to do all that. The first thing I will tell you is what I've always told you, is everyone should look after themselves. And all of you should have some knowledge of this by now. That there are people in this group, more than a handful. Some of you I've given subtle hints to, some of you I have given pointed hints. And some of you fall into the either you do or you don't, because a couple of you have yet to hear me. It's nothing that unusual, but some of you are wired up in here to have the continuing propensity, you and your, that is in a partnership, to hurt yourself, to break things, to break everything from breaking your finger to breaking a vase that you borrowed from somebody. You're wired up to do it, and it's not a moral question. It's not a question of some traumatic experience of your childhood. You should simply realize it. There are people who are wired up. I can look at babies, and I can look at a baby. I can look at a baby 2 or 3 days old, and I can tell you, in many instances, if this served any purpose, of how he's going to walk when he's grown. But I can tell him right now, look, 16 years from now, let's say I went to some relative of mine, and he said, here's my new 2-year-old kid. And I said, how great. And I take a look at him. And I could tell you right then that 16 years from now, if that kid lived anywhere near me and he said, hey, Uncle, can I borrow your car? Not a chance. And I can look at a 2 or 3-year-old kid and know, unless I was going to give him an old pickup truck, but if he's going to take my Ferrari around the corner and they're just going down the street, no. And I can look at him then and tell you, literally. You people have got to get to that point, that there's no such thing as martyrdom. Or if you prefer, there's no such thing as profitable martyrdom. And I'm not saying this as a cheap shot after the fact. Any of you people that's hurt yourself exercising or hurt yourself trying to get a job that you thought would be better to expand your focus. But you must realize on a scale or on a level beyond the ordinary world that you should not be hurting yourself. That is not a cheap or easy shot. Now your partnership may be such that you're accustomed to it. It feels like, hey, what else is new? If we were playing psychologist in the binary world, they could, put you in analysis for years, or they might even give you some comment of, listen, there's certain people, does this happen to you often? You say, yeah, and that's right. There's certain people that seem to have an unconscious desire to hurt themselves, to get attention, all sorts of things. That's true enough in binaryville. That means nothing. But you have got to see at line level consciousness that, hey, I do this. Then you got to stop it. That's it. You have got to take care. You've got to realize, hey, I am the sort. Me and the partnership. Somebody in here takes up skydiving. You think, hey, I'll do it. You got to understand, hey, if I get up in a plane, me and my partnership, I know there's every likelihood in the world I'll jump out and suddenly a voice, that is, the partner will say, did you forget the parachute? Or somebody says, hey, let's go mountain climbing. Some of you should know, if I feel that right now I'm still in the hands of my partnership, maybe right now, maybe just this hour, I feel it this day, there's every chance that I will come back with the world's worst turned ankle, at the very least. You simply should have some awareness that you should not be hurting yourself, and if you do, it is not through psychological reasons, it is not through punishment. You are wired up to get hurt, and you have got to take care. And if taking care means not going mountain climbing, if until further notice or just that day, you should be able to feel that the partnership right now is running at a pretty good clip. Here it is, Saturday morning, I just got up, I don't know what's going on, and the phone rings, and they say, hey, a bunch of us are going and we're going to climb a mountain up so-and-so, do you want to go? You can feel a turned ankle coming on. I can even feel, I just know, I can see almost me tripping sometime during the day and rolling down a hill and hurting my back again. I can just see it. I might as well be reading the future. There is every possibility. There's so much of a possibility it'll happen, and I won't be surprised at all. It'll be like what else is new. You cannot do that. You should not be doing that. The rest of it, in many cases, if you need drugs, medication, is do so. When it gets to some of the problems I know that a handful of you continue to have with your back, other than magic, which I'm not prepared to give you right now, I hate to tell you, it's time. Why do the so-called faith healers never seem to heal anyone with a damaged yellow circuit? It's a good question. Before I do it, it reminds me of a story that I can't resist. That there was a faith healer. After he had the service all wound up and everybody had been dancing and shouting, and he put them in line, everybody was sick. And he started coming up, and he would even point to me and said, "You over here, you got a bad liver. Come here," or just zap. And he said, "Your liver is fine. Go home and praise the Lord. You know, send me a fat little letter with something in it." He said, you madam, you're having trouble with your spleen." He said, "Be healed." He's really knocking out livers and spastic colons and upset stomachs. And people are really getting excited, and some woman in the back jumps up and she runs down hollering, "Preacher, preacher, heal me." And she suddenly trips. And when she does, it's so bad, when she hits the floor, that leg you hear. Everybody heard the bone go. And the preacher heard it, and he hollered, "Somebody call an ambulance quick." And from down the crowd, a voice says, "But preacher, why don't you heal her, the broken leg?" He said, "Son, I do organs. I don't do no broke bones." You can laugh if you want to, but there's more to it. Back to the question, why don't faith healers apparently help damage yellow circuits? All right. Now we're talking about the ordinary scheme of life and what is going on. All right. Ordinary faith healers, as they're called. Now, most of you should hear a piece of this as soon as I put it in words. Could not recognize in any useful way yellow circuit damage. Or they would not be fulfilling the roles as faith healers. Now that which, from some viewpoint, let us say from a reasonable viewpoint, from the kind of viewpoint based on the mappings I've done for you, that we could say, all right, this person has yellow circuit damage. Those drawn into faith healing. Then the whole scenario, remember, it's not just this faith healer and this one person. You got the whole scenario. How many brain or yellow circuit damaged people are going to end up at a faith healing affair to begin with? You always got these kind of considerations. But if you had the person there, or if a, quote, faith healer, again, being a person, an ordinary faith healer, is not wired up to recognize in any useful way yellow circuit damage in anybody. But what they've heard about, what they had read about, what they may have thought they would observe, they would attribute to something else. That is, not living a proper spiritual life. It's the curse, if not directly of some overbearing God, it's a kind of general cosmic mechanical curse of not living in accord to correct spiritual behavior. But it would not be seen as yellow circuit damage. Somebody that would be wired up and drafted into playing the faith healer part, yellow circuit damage would almost be like them saying, someone saying, "Hey, heal the broken leg right here," or tell us what's going on Mars right now. They would translate what they thought they had seen, or what they were told about, or what they read about, not into yellow circuit terminology, not into a yellow circuit, quote, problem or damage, but as to spiritual problems, which to them, that's what everything is. If you're sick, you're spiritually imbalanced. You are not a good Christian, as it happens as most faith healers in our country. You are not living a good Christian life, or by God, you wouldn't be sick. Which there you go again with a good binary explanation, because there is passion to that. It just goes along with it. If you were a good Christian, God would heal you. Well, of course, unless He's testing you in some way. And of course, then they're saying, all right, God either does or He don't. Which, if you notice, if I live long enough, everybody on this planet is going to steal my material.